Welcome back, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, appreciate you coming back on time. For everybody else in the hallway, feel free to chastise them for not being on time, all right? Beginning now. Please welcome Mr. Peter Goldsborough, our panel moderator for the Data and Artificial Intelligence and co-founder and Chief Technology Officer of RUNE Technologies, where he's currently building mission-ready AI and logistics software for national security. Before launching RUNE, Peter served as the chief engineer for the Army C2 Next program at Anduril and helped lead software development for key defense systems like Titan and JADC2. He was also an early engineer on the PyTorch deep learning library at Facebook AI Research and continues to shape future of applied AI in defense. Give him a warm welcome of applause, Mr. Peter Goldsborough.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Peter Goldsborough. I'm the CTO and co-founder of RUNE Technologies, and I am delighted that we've gathered for you what I think are some of the brightest leaders on the topic of data and AI in the Marine Corps logistics community for what I think will be a fruitful and exciting discussion. And my goal is that you will all be able to take a couple of insightful ideas away from today and learn a few things. And it's also special for me to be here because I was here a year ago, and that was just about 30 days into the existence of RUNE Technologies, which we founded specifically to make a positive impact on communities like this. And I came here wide-eyed and ready to learn with a couple of napkin sketches and did learn so much. And so it's just special to be able to be back here now a year later and sponsor the conference and moderate this panel. And with that, I would love to kick it off with introductions, starting with Brigadier General McWilliams.
Yeah, hey, good morning. Brigadier General McWilliams. I'm currently the commander of something called the Joint Enabling Capabilities Command. It's a sub-joint command underneath U.S. Transcom. I've been a logistician for most of my career in the Marine Corps. I am not an expert in data analytics and artificial intelligence like the moderator suggested. But it's a topic that I'm really excited about and I have a lot of passion for. I guess I would just start off, and I'd like to thank AMCL for not only putting on this symposium, but also for what they do every day. Thanks for inviting me again, important topic to talk about. Thanks to the panelists, and thanks to everybody in the audience, whether you're in or out of uniform, what you do for the Marine Corps, the Joint Force of our nation is important. I guess I would just like to offer that, my lens that I look through, and then hopefully my responses and conversation to this topic are all through the lens of warfighting and decision advantage. Okay, so data analytics and AI do a lot of awesome things, but at the end of the day, for at least from where I sit, it's all about decision advantage. And what do I mean by that? It's really the superior understanding of the operating environment and then the ability to make rapid, effective decisions to support the mission. And I think that's the important part of what we're talking about today. Again, it does a lot of awesome things. It helps reduce manpower hours in certain areas. It helps us be more efficient and effective in certain things. But at the end of the day, I think the most important part of what we're talking about here is really that piece on decision advantage. Again, thanks for having me and happy to be here.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Colonel Garaux.
Okay, yeah, good morning. Colonel Joseph Garaux. I'm the commanding officer of Combat Logistics Regiment 2, which is down in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And we provide direct support, tactical logistics to the 2nd Marine Division. And I'm really thrilled to be here today. This becomes just like a mini reunion for me. So it's great to see so many familiar friends and faces and reconnect. And I am excited about the topic. I also have to say I'm not an SME on AI. I've got a poli-sci degree from a state college, a land grant state college. That's really good at football. So I say that with some humility. I am very excited about the topic, much like Brigadier General McWilliams said. I have got a lot of smart people that I'm blessed to have in the regiment that are thinking about this and working with it. And I think we're on the precipice, I say we, probably like the entire DoD, we're on the precipice of something big in AI. What that is exactly, I don't know, but I'm thinking a lot about it, and I'm asking a lot of smart people that are in the audience what their thoughts are, and I'm excited to share some ideas and then maybe develop that conversation out a little more on a sidebar. So I'll kind of hold there, but thank you.
Thank you, sir. Then Mr. Sanders.
All right, move this thing. I'm Scott Sanders. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Forterra. We build full stack autonomous systems for the DoD and commercial. And like you said about a reunion, Joe was my MOI when I was a young cadet at VMI way back in the day. There was no hazing ever happened ever at anything that Joe ran. Very up on level. But I did 10 years in the Marine Corps. I was a recipient of a lot of logistics. And as we were joking earlier, kind of ironic that there is no paper towels in the bathroom right now at a Marine Corps logistics conference. Whoever's deep troll that was, good on you. That was the flex. So I did 10 years in the Marine Corps as a special operator, and then went over to Anduril and got to work there for about 4 years, and now been at Forterra for about 4 years. So excited to talk about the problem sets that I think a lot of companies in the space are trying to solve, and how to do that in partnership with the DoD and specifically with the Marine Corps.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Thanks, everyone. Wonderful. I would love to kick it off with some questions. The first one will be addressed to Colonel Garaux, and then I invite discussion after that. The question reads, AI has the potential to greatly increase the effectiveness and speed of Marine Corps logistics operations. At the same time, we all agree that AI will not and should not replace the human role in warfighting and logistics entirely. So what aspects of logistics should be performed by machines and AI, and what aspects should always be performed by humans?
Okay, that's a great question. Here's a stab at it. I think that I'm very passionate about the human interface, and the humans are in charge, not the other way around. I heard Lieutenant General Sklenka this morning mention how he gets annoyed by technology, I think is what he was saying, where we have technology and then we end up changing our behavior to fit to the technology, not the other way around. And I think AI falls in the same category, at least in my mind. And so I'm seeing a time now, General McWilliams mentioned it, I'm seeing a time now as helping facilitate decision making. And so if we go to Colonel John Boyd's, OODA loop cycle, the observe, orient, decide, act cycle, I'm seeing it time now in the observe, orient cycle and speeding that up. I'm not seeing AI in the decide and act stages or phases yet, although I think that it will come one day. I listened to a number of podcasts the past few weeks to try to prepare for this a little more. It's coming. But the example, we have AI software everywhere, and we're using it in limited capacities right now. We don't have a lot of AI hardware. I don't have drones right now or UAS platforms that are expressly AI enabled. We don't have 7 tons or vehicles or delivery systems that are expressly AI enabled. I think it's coming, and I think we have to be very mindful to keep the human interface in the decide and act portion of that. And so that's kind of where I'm at on it. I'm sure I've glossed over a lot, but that's kind of what I see in the formation right now in the Fleet Marine Forces. Camo GPT, we're using that. That's a closed system, so we have to feed it. It does not scrape off the internet as OpenAI would do or ChatGPT. So because of that, you can put sensitive data in there. But at the end of the day, they're data scrapes. So it's speeding up that observe and orient. And we use the data. We use a little bit of data AI assistance for data collection to run an OPT as we prepared for exercise, and it sped up the Marine Corps planning process. But it didn't pull the human element out of the Marine Corps planning process, at least not yet. And I don't know that it will. It's going to be a while. So that's kind of where I'm at. Does that help?
Yeah, that's a great answer. Other panelists want to add anything on top of that?
Do we get rebuttals? How does this work?
That is allowed.
No rebuttals.
So, okay, well, you're getting one anyway, whether you want or not. Oh, the turns have tabled. So I think the one thing to think about though is if you're introducing new technology to the fleet and the formations, like any other new weapon system, the humans probably have to adapt, right? We changed tactics when medium machine guns became things that everyone carried, right? We changed tactics when HIMARS became a thing that everyone had or had access to. And so if you're thinking about how to deploy AI into formations, the humans will have to adapt and change to it. And I think that, culturally, that has to be a thing that the service is okay with, the way you're going to deploy a fully autonomous logistics platform versus a fully autonomous weapon system versus how am I going to do faster planning cycles for, a thing that is very manual today, logistics planning and resource allocation. you will have to adapt. Some of those things, yes, we should build around the user to the extent possible. And the only way you get that is by rapidly deploying things into the field and making mistakes and seeing it not work. So you can get the feedback into the engineering teams that are building those products. But ultimately, like, we will have to adapt the way we fight wars because of that technology.
I think you're awesome, Scott. I was thinking about aviation as an analogy, where think about aviation in World War I and how rudimentary it was compared to the 5th gen fighter today. You know, so there is this massive evolution in aviation that's happened over the past, I think, 70 to 80 to 90 years, but we still have human interface in aviation. So that's kind of where, I don't know if I'm disagreeing with you. I'm not. I think that's where my mind is. Aviation today is vastly different. The F-35 is doing things that I don't think were even imagined in the 1920s in the nascent stages of military aircraft and aviation. But there's still a very strong human element component to that. So that's kind of where my mind went.
Yeah, but even if you fast forward a couple of years on the aviation side, because we should definitely talk about aviation with a bunch of logistics and non-aviation people on the panel. That'll be good. We'll definitely screw ourselves up on this one. But you go forward a couple of years in the advent of like close air support. What a CAS platform was doing in Korea is not dramatically different than how we do CAS today. But it could be.
Agree.
Right? Like, why do I need to sit on ATAC and like, finger scroll a 9 line when it could be like, hey, I've thought about the situation you're in. I've looked at all the aircraft in the space, and like, you'd be real dumb not to call this in from Point Bravo on a keyhole CAS mission. Right? Like, that's the acceleration. I think it's different, but to your point, there's still a human piece that has to be there.
So I think you guys are spot on. I think that we have to be open to different process and procedures to be able to speed up decision making. And sometimes that means that if AI has the ability for us to be able to do something in a different way, process information differently, we got to be able to unplug from the way we traditionally might do that. So we have to be open to that. I think that's important. I would just say, I think the advantage of AI or machine tasks is certainly large, repetitive, data-heavy tasks. And I think about things like preventive maintenance, data forecasting, route optimization. Those things are really, we can rely really heavily on and save us time, effort, and energy. When there's other tasks that humans are certainly, I think, probably better at: crisis response, contingency planning, ethical oversight. But I think the power ultimately lies on the teaming between a human and the machine. And when you get that human-machine interface and teaming, I think that's where the real power comes from.
And agreed. And then the way we think about this is at RUNE Technologies, and we're advised by Major General Dwayne Gamble from Army G4, and he told us right now logisticians spend 80% of their time doing science and 20% of their time doing art. And what AI and software has the ability to do is actually flip that, so that logisticians can spend 80% of their time commanding an art and only 20% of their time counting how many MREs are needed for a regiment. Right? So flipping that between those two aspects. But thank you for those great responses. I would love to move on to the next question. And for this one, I'd love to address that to General McWilliams. And the question reads: the conflict in Ukraine has been more technologically enabled than any before, with autonomous systems abound. So what lessons should the Marine Corps take away from Ukraine in terms of the role of autonomous systems in general and how they can impact logistics operations?
Yeah, so 3.5 years, I think, at war, plenty of lessons learned. Probably everybody in this audience has read some or all of those lessons. Hard to like really nail down what we want to take away, but I'll offer this overarching theme, if you will, which is, maybe we don't have to focus solely on high-end tech, right? I think that the Ukrainian conflict has certainly offered, cheaper, low-tech solutions to be able to navigate and conduct warfare. And I think about low-cost drones, the importance of electronic warfare. Certainly, you've seen a lot with the vulnerabilities to supply lines, and then potentially autonomous resupply, right? So if you want to just break some of those down a little bit, drones, and we all know what drones can do for the force, whether it's, not only from an offensive perspective, but a resupply perspective. It's also created an opportunity for us to look at how drones have been disruptive in the supply chain or in able to do sustainment operations, which I think from a Marine Corps perspective, then it just doubles down on the need for redundancy, potentially diversion, how we might utilize some of those capabilities to our advantage to think about how we might do sustainment differently. I think it also highlights the importance that we need to operate and maneuver inside the electromagnetic spectrum, right? Because that is key to being able to maneuver, to be able to be successful in sustainment in the next conflict, the current and next conflict. And I think that has been highlighted in this particular conflict. You've seen instances where, you can potentially steal data, if you will, or pull data from an enemy source. So a lot of great opportunities to look at how we might utilize some of those technologies. And specifically, if you're talking logistics, I think it reinforces our path on using drones to do resupply at different levels. It also, I think, reinforces our need to think about autonomous resupply vehicles and how we create better dispersion and deception on the battlefield. But happy to unpack them or anything additional.
Yeah, thanks, sir. Any thoughts on Ukraine? Autonomous systems?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned deception because it was on my mind, and so I'll go ahead and sidebar off that for a minute. I think Ukraine has shown us that we have to start thinking about logistics deception in earnest in the Fleet Marine Forces, and so that's something that we've been working on at CLR2. I got the idea. I didn't dream that up. I got the idea from a J4 brief. I think Colonel Scott Beatty gave it a couple years ago, and then last year this conference on day 3, General Berger, stayed to the very end to hear General Berger speak, and I was talking to him after his keynote address, and he asked me. He said, "I don't know why you guys are not more involved in logistics deception operations. Make your formation look like something that's not. Put it somewhere in the spectrum or otherwise where it looks like it is, and get sophisticated about that." Well, that was a pretty powerful conversation for me to have with the former Commandant of the Marine Corps, and so we took that back to 2nd MLG, and we're working on that. It's not simple, obviously, and it has to be nested with, in my case, with 2nd Marine Division's scheme of maneuver. But I do think we can use AI to help solve some of those challenges. Like, so for example, the weather patterns, AI is showing us that it can do predictive analytics a lot better on weather patterns than the current models are. It could probably also do better predictive analytics on the spectrum management. So what should we make our formation look like, or where should we put our formation based on atmospherics? I firmly believe AI can do that for us and do it for us very quickly. And so that's something that we're looking to continue to build on.
Appreciate that. Scott, anything you have to add on?
I feel like we could talk about Ukraine and lessons learned for the entire panel and never get to the other 20 questions you got on there. So we have teams in Ukraine right now, and the biggest feedback that we get is, to your point earlier on human machine sort of integrated formations, how do they operate with it? That's the biggest things. They get a lot of tech experiments that come into the space that are science projects, and they don't make it past sort of the LD, if you will, in Eastern Ukraine. And so it's really important to take what you can from the Ukraine conflict, and I think also acknowledge what you can't take from it, which is you have 2 forces that are operating without any air cover whatsoever, or limited deep strike as well. And so I think the cautionary tale is, if you take too many lessons learned from Ukraine, you shape a force around a war that is not the way we would want to fight a war, right? How many F-35s made it into Iranian airspace without being touched? 105? It would be a very different war if the US was involved in it. We should acknowledge that. And also simultaneously take the thing that I think the Ukrainians are doing better than anyone, which is the user feedback loop, which is, I think, the thing the Marine Corps should take from the conflict, just as a writ large lesson of why can they move so quickly? They just go buy things and then they test them. And if they don't work, they stop using them. We haven't done that in the U.S. military for like, I don't know, ever. And so the ability to get things deployed, test them in that EW environment that you realistically can't recreate in the U.S. Right? You go jammer hot on 1.2 gigs in Yuma, you're shutting down air traffic control in LA. Like it's a true story. It happened to some of us at one point in time. It's like, God, it's bad times. You don't want to do that. And so you need the ability to go into that environment and test and deploy and test and deploy. And you can't have the mentality of like, let's just PowerPoint this thing to death and hope that Marforce Syscom eventually buys something, because then you're going to be 10 years behind. And so thinking through I'm sure every logistician here likes to talk about like logistics win wars, tactics win battles, some version of that. Procurement is what is going to stifle innovation in the U.S. military and the Marine Corps at large. You have to buy things and try them. And that's where you figure out, what is that human-machine interface? How did they actually do it? How did this perform in a contested environment? What are the actual things that we can take from those deployments, even if they're at an ITX or a training environment? And you have to be able to cycle that very, very quickly. And that's what the Ukrainians have mastered better than anyone.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And actually, we'll stay with you, Scott, for the next question. And that is, what can the Marine Corps learn from data-driven commercial supply chains? And what aspects of military logistics will always be uniquely military?
I think, if you look at a commercial supply chain, whether it's through Costco, Amazon, FedEx, UPS, DHL, whatever you want to look at as like sort of the gold star example of how you get things from point A to point B. One of the advantages that those companies have that the military doesn't is like they're doing it every day. Right. And so we need a way that I would, tell me if I'm wrong here, but like CLR2 isn't doing mass logistics every day. Right. It's supporting micro operations across the division.
For sure. And our bottom line is different, than the civilian interface.
Yeah, it's totally different. Yeah, the amount of people, like Palmer used to say this in Andrew, he'd be like, oh, they should have Amazon do all the military logistics. It would just work. I'm like, who do you think works at Amazon? Like, everyone here have retired logistics friends that work at Amazon? It's just retired Marines and Army 04s. Like, it's the same people that now have a system that is much more flexible to go iterate quickly, and they have the scale and the repetitiveness, right? And so we have to train to that. We have to demonstrate that. Like, okay, when can we flex that logistics muscle? And it's not just a movement to a range to drop off pallets of ammo or whatever. Treat that as a training environment for that data. How can we do this more efficiently? How can we do that tasking? Because I don't know, I've been out of the Marine Corps for like 10 years, so I don't know how this works anymore, but it used to be a spreadsheet you filled out, right? And like, I would like this DODAC to show up, and then like the wrong one comes.
Yeah, no, but I mean, Scott,
Can't shoot 50 cal rounds out of your M4? No.
I think you're on to something, Scott. But the bottom line, I think, it's a healthy understanding of, or appreciation. I know this audience understands that in spades, that the bottom line is very different in the DoD than it is with our corporate counterparts. And I think it's a little bit of a trap that we can easily fall into. I know my own 27 years of doing this. When I first came in, it was just-in-time logistics, and then it was log mod, logistics modernization, but it was really all efficiency, leaning things out, all that stuff was out there alive and well. And I think, if I'm understanding General Sklenka correctly, when I hear him talk about this stuff, this PRC thing, it's not going to be necessarily an efficiency fight. It's going to be a capability battle. So our bottom line, we know our bottom line is different, and it's even probably more so now than the Desert Wars. And so to me, it's just a kind of a healthy reminder that we can definitely take a lot, I think, from our corporate counterparts, from the Walmarts and the FedExes, but not everything,
Yeah, I think that would be the cautionary tale. Like, FedEx and UPS are extremely lean operations when it comes to, logistics overhead. And
They're also relatively static too, right? Compared to the DoD.
Yeah, they know where their logistics centers are usually after they build them.
I couldn't agree more on the requirements being different. Actually, on the interesting unit of load planning, right, when we explore that in the commercial industry, a Walmart or a JB Hunt, they're exclusively focused on cost. That is their only metric that they're optimizing for. So spending a long time perfectly solving a logistics puzzle is something they can afford to do if it minimizes cost.
Yeah,
whereas
and it's a static problem to the point.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas in ITX, I think speed, for example, speed and correctness matters much more in a military environment than perfect optimal cost efficiency.
Yeah, I think we need to be built for effectiveness, not necessarily efficiencies. But I think that doesn't dismiss a lot of the things that we can learn from commercial industry, right? They have mastered some things, and to your point earlier, at scale. So that's probably something we don't do often enough, is be able to do logistics effectiveness at scale. There's ways to get after that, right? It may not be physical scale, but you can simulate scale. And so I think we can explore ways to work on, simulated scale logistics. But I don't think, and I know you're not suggesting this, but I don't think we can dismiss, there's a lot of good things we can take from industry that we can figure out how they can apply to the U.S. military, and we're doing that. And we should be continue to do that because I think that's going to help us hone our skills and ultimately make us more effective in the long run.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for those answers. For the next topic, I would actually love to kick off the discussion and then open it up to the other participants. Broad topic here is disconnected operations, right? And so what we're seeing here is that over the last decade, there's been a huge push for AI capabilities and software to move into the cloud. And the cloud is awesome because it has infinite resources and infinite bandwidth. But we also know that connectivity from the field to the cloud in combat operations is going to be spotty at best, and that it's going to be disconnected, degraded, intermittent, and latent, as we know. And so that's obviously a tension between the technological push in the commercial industry and what combat operations needs. The way we've thought about this at RUNE, and then would love to invite other opinions, is it's really in 2 points. The first is empathy. So when we build software technology or AI technology for military and Marine Corps environments, we have to have empathy with the unique requirements of that environment. So we have a lot of great software developers we bring in from Amazon, from Facebook, and when they join RUNE and we have them start working on national security problems, we have to sit them down and tell them, well, hey, this is gonna be a little different, right? The connectivity isn't always gonna be there. And so we have to take that into account and build for different requirements. And then concretely what that's meant for us is that when we focus on building our software, we thought about how do we make this work on a laptop in the jungle in the Philippines? Or how do we make it work in a jammed up trench in Ukraine? And so that's guided us to, for example, focus on making it offline first so you can operate in disconnected environments. It's made us focus on how do we synchronize data in a mesh network with other nodes when they're online, if they're online. And it's made us think about if all we have is a 5 kilobyte per second MEO shot, which commercial industry doesn't have to deal with, we definitely need to prioritize the data that we're sending over that pipe. So to make sure we send the HIMARS logstat first and the bayonet logstat, whenever that's available, but also utilize the bandwidth when the bandwidth is available, and then actually empower the commo to almost have like a dial that they can dial the bandwidth up and down based on the larger electromagnetic spectrum landscape that they are dealing with. And so those are some of the ways we've thought about the problem set, but I would love other opinions on the topic as well.
Yeah, so we talked about this before we came into the panel. I think this particular question is fascinating. I would frame it like this, or like to talk about it like this. So it's like kind of like, I think about this as balanced investment, right? So when you think about what we're talking about, data analytics and AI, and we're all moving in that direction, I think we need to think about it layered from the tactical to the strategic level, because that data is used at different levels for different things and for different decision makers. And so I would offer a couple things that I would like to package together and maybe talk about them, right? Edge computing, offline capabilities, data synchronization, resilient networks, and model compression. So if you can think about that from an investment perspective, you can package that all together. If you're down at the tactical level and now you're trying to maneuver inside the electromagnetic spectrum, and we give the tools to those tactical commanders to be able to do that. We do that today, or we're starting to do that today when it's just from basic communications. But now when you're talking about compute power at the edge to be able to utilize these platforms, how do you do that at the tactical level to be able to give those commanders the ability to see the electromagnetic spectrum and then make decisions on when to utilize these technologies, to be able to unplug from the cloud so that way you can't be, or you reduce your signal, and then how do you then, from a TTP perspective, connect back to the network at the right time through the right platforms to be able to synchronize data, unplug again, and continue to operate. So when I think about how we're going to use AI and data analytics from the tactical to the strategic level, maybe not the right words, but there's got to be a balanced investment across the board to bundle all of these things together to ensure that we're enabling those commanders at the tactical edge to be able to use, to compute, and also maneuver inside the electromagnetic spectrum to be able to ensure that they're protecting themselves. And again, I think at some point it's a balanced approach to how we tackle both hardware, software, and that complicated problem.
Couldn't agree more.
Yes. If I just add, sir, you triggered a thought. I think our United States Navy is probably, and you won't hear Marines say this very often, I think they're probably better at this than us. So when I think about the MCON procedures that our ships, that our L-class ships go through as you're transiting, there's a selective comms at certain times and certain periods for certain reasons. And it's mysterious to people who don't really need to know what they're doing or why they're doing it. But there's obviously a very complex science behind it. And I wonder if that's where we probably need to go, except for not floating on L-class ship. We need to do that in the field environment as well.
There's science behind it. I'm pretty convinced the Navy's like, we should just be in MCOM 0 for as long as physically possible to see how fast we can piss off all the Marines.
That's it.
Like, hey, we're gonna tweak the dial on this one, see if we can get these guys riled up.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah, and I think I'm convinced that's how it works. I think you're right though. It's like, but you almost don't want to dial. You want it to be adaptive. And I think this goes into using AI for mission planning. So like, we deploy models of the edge for that purpose. Like there's a lot of things AI is very good at. There's a lot of things it's actually not very good at. And one of the advantages is like being able to like speak to or type out a mission plan and have it create all that optionality for you. And part of that needs to be like, how are you perceiving the electromagnetic environment and going, all right, well, we're probably not going to have comms in this part of the environment. What do you want your robots to do? What do you want your drones to do? When do you want to push that data? And you're going to make trades when it comes to bandwidth, right? Anytime you have the bandwidth that's going to enable full motion video and all of the data to come back also means that now you're a beacon of SIGINT light to the Chinese SIGINTer who's like, sweet, you got a 10-watt radio on that bad boy? I got a solution for you. And so it's doing that and then having the human supervision to say, yes, I am okay with these comms in these environments, but adapting through repeated data input through training exercises and getting those models to be built. Because that's not a thing that any of the open models are going to be able to do for you today because that data doesn't exist, right? You have to go create that environment and you have to go create those data sets through exercises, through training, through user feedback in the field. And coming back to the production matters type thing, you have to have the systems out there to collect this. And you have to replicate that at things like ITX. And I'm sure ITX has changed a lot since last time I went through that terrible experience. The 7th Marines home unit, man, that was the best time. To watch the East Coast guys come out and be like, hey, it's really hot out here. Yes, excellent. But you have to do that and we have to change the way we train to be able to capture that data and you need the platforms to be able to capture it so that you can actually do what everyone's talking about here, right? You can talk about it forever, but there's no fully autonomous Marine units out in the field today at an ITX doing this. And that's kind of the problem. That has to start happening and that needs buy-in from senior Marine Corps and Army leadership on what is actually important.
Yeah, I mean, I made a note about behavior modification and maybe a little segue to that is I don't see AI causing us to modify our behaviors just yet. And I kind of use this as an example. I mean, I believe this modified our behavior. It modified the way we communicate. It modified our social strata. It modified the way I do banking. I think it's coming, but I don't see it yet in the formation. I see it as an augmentation or an enhancement to get us to shorten the decision-making timeline process. And I think it's a massive advantage. I don't want to gloss over the utility of that. But I haven't seen us actually doing things necessarily differently or that we weren't doing before because of AI.
This is a good example, though.
I think it's coming.
Let's talk about the phone, because this came out when you were a young captain at VMI.
It did.
Yeah, when we had our flip phones in hollowed out Barbasol cans hidden from certain instructors, so you know we had our flip phones. Get that old Nokia brick fit perfectly in a saline bottle. The things you learn as a young student, like how can I hide this? But like the phone came out, but if you went to an original iPhone, it wasn't dramatically different from a flip phone in terms of what you could do on it. There wasn't the network, right? No one had created the network, so you weren't sending video, you didn't have data, really. You had what was it, Edge network back then? It was like slightly better. There wasn't an app store. And all those things got created because people started buying a very beta early product from Apple and said, hey, that looks like I'm gonna be able to go do something different with it. And there was, if you go back in time through the internet and looked at like what was the feedback on the original iPhone, all of the pundits were like, this is stupid. Why would I not want a keyboard on my phone? Why would I want to browse the internet on my phone? I have a computer that does that. That kind of reminds me of like where the DoD is today. It's like, well, in the future, I could see all these things happening, distributed compute at the edge, all this stuff. Until you start buying systems and putting them in the field, you're not going to know what that Lance Corporal is going to do with the technology, right? And we've been talking about autonomous systems and drones since, I don't know, I was a second lieutenant, right? And that was a while ago. And until you get them into the formations, until you're using them, you're not going to find the use case of like, man, it'd be really cool if I could like watch movies on this, right? If I could record notes on it, if I could use it as a flashlight, which everyone has probably used in the last 24 hours to find something. We used to carry flashlights. What a crazy concept. Just on my phone, right? But no one thought of that. There wasn't a flashlight app on the first iPhone. It was an app someone sold for 99 cents afterwards. And then Apple stole the idea, and here we are. So you have to get the hardware into the field to be able to do all these things. They're not gonna happen through the perfect Marine Corps acquisition, milestone A, milestone B, milestone C, because that's gonna take 5 years at the fastest, right? You actually have to get things into those formations quickly. You have to deploy them with end users. You have to get engineering into the field and to get the user feedback, because unlike commercial, you can't just design a product and say, this is sick, everyone should just buy it, right? There's no way to do that in the DoD. There probably shouldn't be. And so it's a thing to think about as we move into this age of like, well, this is what it can do and it's not there yet. It's not there yet because the ecosystem doesn't exist. It has to exist before you can move on to that stage.
So I would just offer, I think in parts of the department, it is changing behavior, right? Now, maybe not on the autonomous side, but when you think about the use of data analytics and AI, I think it is driving change in behavior. I think we're smarter in the way we analyze data to be able to make decisions. I think we're making those decisions more rapidly. We're asking for different information because now we know it's available. Even on the planning side, right? So somebody mentioned this earlier, but there's a couple planning platforms out there that when you put the right parameters in, they can do what used to take us like a week to do wargaming on multiple scenarios, like they can do in 2 hours. And so we're testing that, right? We're testing that to make sure that the outcomes that it's presenting to you are solid. But when you get that mature enough, it is going to change behavior. It's going to change behavior on the way and it's starting to do that, right? It's going to take time, no doubt about it, but I think it is starting to change our behavior. I would offer, even over the last couple of years, if you just off the data piece for a minute, but just think about maneuvering inside the electromagnetic spectrum. Like we are so much smarter today than we were 5 years ago, and we're getting technologies into the hands of our Marines to be able to make better decisions on how you're going to command and control. So it's not going to happen overnight, but I would offer that it is, at least from my perspective, we are starting to change behavior because of these tools that are in the toolkit.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you so much for all those points. I just want to remind the audience of just some of my favorite points from the discussion we just had before we open it up to questions. Really like touching on what we just talked about from Colonel Garaux. I think just the emphasis that behavior hasn't changed everywhere just quite yet. I think that's actually an excellent challenge to the industry folks to actually think about how do we influence technology to enact change in that way. So I think that's an insightful point about just where we're at right now, even though I think we all agree that it is coming, but we need to get there. Then on that point, I also really appreciate, Scott, your emphasis today on the importance of testing AI in realistic environments and buying before you try. So we won't get there if we're not testing. So it's a collaboration between industry and the military side to actually try out new technology and give us feedback and see what works and what doesn't. And then General McWilliams, I also really appreciate your point early on about human-machine formations as really the way to go. It's not about AI alone or humans alone. It's about teaming those two together for maximum impact and maximum effectiveness. So I hope we can all take those highlights away from the discussion right here. And with that, we have a couple minutes left for questions to the panel. There should be microphones available, or you can just yell really loudly. But wonderful, yes, sir.
All right, gentlemen, good morning. Thinking about this, then, the broad topic of data and artificial intelligence, if we're thinking about a material novelty, we have to have some kind of appreciation for its use in an organization that can help realize it. So cohering all of this data and AI is this theory of a sustainment web. So what the fires guys are getting from their side, theoretically, the logisticians should be seeing a mirror image of that from their perspective. So if you're General McWilliams, or you're Kevin Collins, and now you're maneuvering 3rd MLG in corridors and lanes that are so vast that were not designed for an MLG, and you have discontiguous logistics battalions that are also inside the MLRs, what kind of data do you need now for sustainment at that scale for an organization that's trying to hold the door open for 60 days before the rest of the joint force closes? And what kind of AI-enabled decisions do you need to see emerge from that to be able to deal with an environment that is inherently all about effectiveness but has none of the efficiencies? So how do you coalesce these ideas that you put together under that scenario?
You couldn't think of an easier question?
Yes.
Absolutely not.
Yes.
Not for you, because you've got the talents. I know
I
you've
agree.
been thinking about this.
Hey, so I'm just going to speak very broadly, right? Because I think that we could probably spend an hour going down a bunch of rabbit holes. But what I would think about it if I was in my old job doing what you just asked, first thing is I'm going to want to understand all of the intelligence that's in the battle space, right? From enemy perspective and to include friendly perspective. How do you fuse all that information to create the right picture? And now, since we're in the business of sustainment, I would want to understand everything about sustainment and be able to see it very clearly, understand where all the 2MEF, in my last example at 2nd MLG, where all 2MEF sustainment is and what levels they are, integrated with the schema maneuver, and understanding how we are going to position forces to be able to support rather than, and now what we're doing is we've just unpacked. I would be asking for every piece of data that I could associate myself with to be able to paint a picture. Conversely, I would want to know the same thing about the enemy, right? Because one of the things I think we need to think about is if you understand the enemy's pattern of life, if you understand their sustainment requirements, if you understand their sustainment activities, the maneuver that you see on the ground, you can start to think about what the enemy is going to do from a sustainment perspective, which I think then, if you're going back to the MEF, helps the MEF understand potential targeting options for you to be able to target enemy sustainment. That's a really broad answer, but I would want to touch everything because I think that ultimately that's going to help make the right decisions at the right time. Yeah, probably not the best answer, but
Can we unpack some of that? Because that was actually really interesting as a reformed intel officer, it's questionable at best. One of the interesting things that was really hard to do, especially in Iraq and Afghanistan, just because of the nature of the war, was enemy logistics weren't a thing, right? As you get into more high-end combat, even what you're seeing in Ukraine, knowing what the enemy's logistics capability is should actually drive your scheme maneuver, should actually drive your attack plan. If you know that they can't resupply or they're extremely limited, and I know this has been a huge problem on the Ukrainian side, just massing ammunition is actually a really hard problem, right? And if you know that the opposing force is having that same problem, that's going to give you exploitation sort of opportunities that you normally wouldn't have. If you know that, hey, we know what their production of, 155 shells or standoff weapons are, they've shot, 200 in the last 5 days, and this is where they've shot them from. Well, they're probably Winchester, so we should go exploit that. That's huge. That's probably for the Intel conference. It's here later this afternoon, and we'll be talking about this. But I think it's a capability that you just haven't had from an intelligence perspective. Like there was no way you could sort through that without something like AI.
For sure.
Now the question is, will it be accurate enough, and will you now run that exploitation plan, or will it be like the scene out of Batman where the guy doesn't count the shells correctly? No one remembers that scene? Okay, well,
remember.
thank you.
So just conversely on that, flipping that around to look at us too. Like
Yeah.
if you can use AI to look at how we're doing that, the enemy can see the same thing. And so that may drive our patterns on how we might maneuver and or provide sustainment or deception or whatever, right?
Yeah, that becomes now like your tech IO stow thing of, well, how do I need to shape the environment so that they think we have different logistics capabilities, different places? But then becomes the hard part of like, well, how do we do logistics? It's LVSRs, the 7 tons, this big giant semi trucks that look nothing like regular semi trucks, and becomes a lot easier. But that should also drive again back to acquisitions. Well, what are we actually buying? And is the right answer we need 7,000 7 tons, or is the answer I need actually a bunch of host nation Mack truck things, or any other company? I'm not shilling Mack up here. There's a great American company owned by the Swedes, and does that drive? Again, back to procurement. How does that drive the acquisition cycle? Because at the end of the day, you're going to go to the war with the capability you have today, not the one you want in 5 years. And that should drive wargaming.
I agree. Last year, Joe and I were here and we talked about multimodal distribution, and at the end of the day, being able to get your hands on anything that can do distribution is key. And so I think you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that we got
Travis,
to
I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
It start only because it tells you what commanders think about now in terms of their CCIRs and what they demand for an ingest, so they can, visualize and inform for their staffs. But their staffs can also then take a data-centric environment and look at this and go, what things do I need to pull together to constitute the prompts I need from my AI to help me make this decision across the web? Like, how do you do that?
right.
And it kind of begins with commander's responsibility to visualize, describe, and direct.
I also think that kind of scenario you played out, and the more data that we have our hands on and can analyze rapidly, it allows you to connect dots that maybe you couldn't previously have connected. And that goes from down to the tactical all the way up to the operational level. And sometimes those things mean something, right? When you understand, in our case, if you understand what the operational throughput is to support the MEF, you might make different decisions on the ground, maybe, right? And so being able to connect dots across the spectrum of logistics, and you can only do that, I think, if you understand all the inputs in the data and you have some platform or AI to help you move through that pretty quickly.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you. I'm glad we got to this topic. The next question was actually going to be the impact of AI on intelligence on adversary and our own logistics. So I'm glad we got to that naturally. That's awesome. We do have to close the panel now. So thank you so much to the panelists for what I think was an awesome discussion. And thank you for the audience for listening and for the great questions. Thank you.